Hey guys, it's me, James. What follows is a segment of Friday Night Fiction, a new thing I've added to the podcast with fictional crime stories written and narrated by me, created in the style of those entertaining old school shows like the Alfred Hitchcock Hour, Dragnet, and the Twilight Zone. This story, titled Dead Cold Drop, is 27 chapters long and is coming to you in 5 episodes. I hope you enjoy it.
This episode contains explicit content, including profanity and depictions of violence and murder. Listener discretion is advised.
Good evening and welcome back to Friday Night Fiction and part 2 of our story, Dead Cold Drop. If the previous episode of this story has slipped through your ears, I heartily suggest you tiptoe back and eavesdrop. Otherwise, tonight's revelations of the adventures of Bismarck's own Doug Rolfstad, his daughter Mandy, and Cowboy the Cat may catch you quite off guard. Now, let's return to the story and see how a city terrorized by murder might collide with our mild-mannered plumber, Mr. Doug Rolfstad. Chapter 6. The interstate back to Bismarck stretched out before him like a pale ribbon fading into the fog. Doug maneuvered carefully, his hands gripping the steering wheel with a steady, firm tension. Each time a semi roared past in the fast lane, the little plumber's truck shook and rattled like a spooked horse. Mandy's words played over and over in his head. "They'll be coming for me next, won't they?" Doug slammed his open palm against the steering wheel. "God damn it," he barked. This whole ordeal with Mandy and the money and the murder seemed to hammer home the gnawing feeling that had been growing inside of him ever since Doreen had passed away. He caught himself thinking about it now and then. It didn't seem to matter how much you attempted to walk the line. You could be the most law-abiding, hard-working citizen in all of North Dakota, and without warning, some really bad people, or just really bad luck, could turn your life upside down. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want debt or legal issues. He wanted to work, to pay his bills, and to go fishing in his free time. He felt like he'd done everything right. He served in the military in Korea. He'd only had 2 traffic tickets his entire life. He even returned his VHS videos on time. And yet, here he was, scraping by, his wife gone, and his daughter somehow pulled into a damn crime circuit, or whatever the hell this was all about. When he arrived at Bismarck, Doug didn't head straight home to call a lawyer. Before he even realized it, he'd veered south towards Mandy's neighborhood. He would only pass her house once. No stopping, no dumb stunts, just a quick look to see if everything looked normal. Maybe the cops were already there wanting to question Mandy, or maybe some killer sat in a car outside waiting. Doug's stomach tightened as he made his way to North 11th Street. 2 blocks from her house, he took a deep breath. He snatched his sunglasses from the visor and slapped them on. 1 block away, he eased off the gas a little. 3 houses away, and nothing looked out of place. A few cars lined the curb, but Doug had no idea who her neighbors were or what they drove. He stared straight ahead, forcing himself not to gawk. When he finally rolled past 931 North 11th Street, he let himself glance over, just once. The little white cottage with blue trim stood there as usual, with the front door closed. He kept driving, resisting the urge to circle through the back alley. For now, this was enough. 20 minutes later, he stood in his own kitchen, flipping through the yellow pages. He skimmed until he reached defense attorneys, a whole column of names, some of them boasting available 24/7. He circled 3 options, then grabbed the phone mounted on the wall. On his first attempt, he got a call center. "Law offices of Peterson and Green, how can I help you?" "I'm looking for a defense attorney," Doug said. What's the process? What does it cost?" "Are you in immediate need?" Well, have you been arrested? No, not arrested, he muttered, but it's urgent. Retainers vary with the complexity of the case, she said, her tone polite but professional. If you'd like to leave your information, an attorney can call you back probably within an hour or two. Doug gave his name and number. When she asked about the nature of the case, he froze up, his mind whirling with half-truths and omissions. Finally, he just said, I'll explain later, and he hung up. The next 2 calls went straight to answering machines. He left messages, short, awkward ones, then hung up. He wandered to the refrigerator and stared at his options. His stomach was growling, but food felt out of the question somehow. Instead, he grabbed one of his bottles of wild turkey from the cupboard and poured himself a solid measure. He carried the glass to the living room and settled into his recliner. The whiskey slid down his throat, warming his chest and loosening the knot in his gut. He settled into his recliner and tried to think the whole thing through. He rubbed his temples, sipped on the whiskey. The murder of Alex Schatz looped over and over in his head. He pictured a young kid pinned against a tree, eyes wide with panic. Tell us where the money is, Alex, someone would have said, a knife at his throat. Doug shook his head. This whole thing was so far beyond his comfort zone. What did he know about murder, stolen money, and drug deals? He took another sip and tried to concentrate. Think, Rolfstad. Think. Chapter 7. Doug scratched his chin and tried to think it through. Mandy had said that the money was rolled up in the Monday morning newspaper. According to the media, police believed Alex Schatz was killed late Monday night or in the wee hours of Tuesday morning. But this was Friday. Doug kicked back the recliner and stared at the ceiling. He counted off the days on his hand, his thumb tapping each weekday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If the killers had tortured Alex for answers Monday night, and if that's what this murder was all about and how it went down, certainly Alex would have begged for his life. He would have told them where the money was, pleaded to show them. Maybe he and Mandy had been so consumed by the fear that the killers could strike at any damn moment that they never stopped to ask the obvious question. Why hadn't they come to get it already? After all, monsters capable of that kind of evil, they wouldn't wait around, would they? They would have gone to Mandy's place immediately. They would break in if they had to, ransack the place. In fact, Doug thought now, the money might already be gone, the killers gone. And if the maniacs had what they were looking for, maybe the threat to Mandy was also gone. Maybe. Doug pushed the lever on his recliner. The footrest folded back into place, and the chair threw him into a sitting position. He stood up. There was only one way to find out if the money was still tucked under Mandy's couch. He made his way to the attached garage where he extracted a dust-coated black plastic case from a shelf. Unlatching its metal clasps, he opened it. Inside lay a .22 caliber pistol, heavier than he remembered. It had been ages since he held it. He rummaged until he found a box of shells. He loaded them one at a time into the 6-shooter. He spun the cylinder slowly at first, inspecting the shells. Then he tried flipping it closed with a snap of the wrist, like he'd seen in movies. 2 of the shells flew out, bounced on the concrete floor, and rolled under the boat. He got down on his hands and knees and fished them out, loaded the gun again, more carefully this time, then slowly closed the cylinder. Next, he pulled on his work overalls, Doug plumbing stitched across the back. His matching baseball cap was next, its brim scuffed and grimy. Doug slid the pistol into a deep pocket and patted it through the heavy workman's fabric. Satisfied, he ducked back inside the house. From a small hallway table, he retrieved his spare set of keys to Mandy's house. Standing at the mirror, he paused to inspect his reflection. "Just an on-call plumber here to fix a leak," he muttered. "Nothing weird about that." He patted the pocket again, feeling the cold metal of the gun. His eyes drifted to the framed photo on the table. Ice fishing at Sweetbriar Lake. Mandy at 9, bundled in an oversized coat, holding a steaming cup of hot chocolate. Doreen grinning wide, cheeks rosy from the cold. He picked it up and traced the picture's edge with his thumb. Suddenly the phone rang, startling him, and he moved to the kitchen and answered. "Is this Mr. Rolfstad?" a man asked. "This is Dennis Green, attorney at law. I understand you need immediate help?" "Oh yeah, hi. But am I correct that you are not in custody?" Doug shifted, unsure how to explain everything. He didn't want to share anything with anyone over the phone. He wanted to see signed paperwork in front of him, something that said attorney-client privilege. No, not arrested, but it's urgent. I need some counsel. Could we meet in person?" "Of course," the attorney said. "Thing is, I'm in the Twin Cities now and I won't be back until Sunday. How about 4 p.m. Sunday at my office?" Doug grabbed a notepad and jotted down the address to the law offices of Peterson and Green. Next to it he wrote 4 p.m. Sunday, then circled it. Then he hung up and headed out the door. Chapter 8. The late afternoon sky was deep blue and bright across western North Dakota. Doug couldn't tell if it was the lingering whiskey or the sunshine making everything seem clearer. As he drove south along State Street, passing the Capitol building, he hung a left on 9th, getting closer to Mandy's little cottage. He didn't really know what to expect. Maybe he'd find everything quiet at 931 North 11th Street, money or no money, nothing but a pissed off and starving cat. He hung a left on Avenue F, and a minute later it was time. He eased off the accelerator and hung a right on 11th Street. First came the church on the corner, and then Mandy's house coming up on the left. He drove slowly. Doug's eyes carefully scanned every parked car on the street. No shadowy figures slouched behind foggy windows, no odd movements, just a few sedans and pickups that looked like they belonged. He drove past her house without slowing down, glancing over briefly. He took a left at the end of the block, then hung another left almost immediately, slipping into the back alley. The narrow lane was silent, flanked by fences, garbage bins, a few dog turds, and snow-covered yards. Doug cruised forward carefully, slowing as he flanked Mandy's back fence. Her gate was closed, the back door looked shut, and there were no footprints disturbed in the fresh snow. Satisfied, he drove all the way through the alley, then looped around to the street again, where he pulled Doug's plumbing right into Mandy's front driveway. He set the parking brake and cut the engine. Patting the gun in his pocket, he grabbed the door handle and took a quick, deep breath. "Okay, Rolfstad, act natural. You're just a plumber on a call." He walked casually to the back of the truck, opened the rear doors, and rummaged through his tools. He bent one knee and inspected the sole of his boot. He hobbled to the street curb, then scraped the imaginary dog crap from his boot while carefully stealing glances up and down the block. He should have been an actor, Rolfstad, he thought. The neighborhood looked quiet, just an ordinary Friday early evening in Bismarck, North Dakota. He took a final look at the sole of his boot, made a final scrape in the snow, then headed towards the front door. Doug practically jumped out of his skin when he saw movement in the living room window. His hand darted toward the pistol in his pocket before he realized it was just Cowboy pacing through the curtains, meowing silently through the thick glass. Doug exhaled sharply, running a hand over his face. "Jesus Christ," he muttered. "Goddamn cat." He retreated to the rear of the truck again, pretending to check his toolbox. He grabbed an old rag and wiped the sweat from his brow. After a moment, he took a deep breath and said, "Okay." He walked to the front door of the cottage, and with his right hand inside his pocket, gripping the gun, he pressed the doorbell with his left. Then, quickly, his back shielding the line of view from any eyes from the street, he discreetly grabbed the doorknob and jiggled it. It was locked. He took a step back and waited, his heart pounding. Who the hell knows, maybe some maniac. Friday's edition of the Bismarck Herald lay in front of the door. He stepped on it quickly, feeling it out. Nothing bulky or weird, just a normal newspaper. At the living room window, Cowboy was staring and yowling from behind the glass. He stepped away from the door, turning towards the truck again while carefully sneaking another scan down the block as he moved along. Still no curious neighbors, no suspicious cars, no cops. As he walked along the north side of the home and around to the backyard, his boots crunched in the snow. As he went along, his eyes inspected the windows. They looked untouched, and still no footprints in the snow. A row of dark clouds was moving in, ready to obscure the pending sunset. He walked to the back door. He pulled Mandy's house keys from his left pocket and the gun from his right. He knocked on the door and waited. He knocked again, paused a moment, then peered through the glass into the dimly lit kitchen. It looked normal, certainly not ransacked. Mandy's blue sweatshirt hung over the back of a chair, Johnny's liquors printed across the front. On the counter, a spoon and a blue bowl stood next to a box of Cheerios and a carton of milk. His hand shook a little as he jutted the key into the lock, turned the knob, then swung the door open. Chapter 9. Doug took a half step into Mandy's kitchen. "Doug's plumbing," he called out, trying for a casual tone, his heart pounding again. As expected, Cowboy dashed straight to him, weaving around Doug's legs and howling for food. "Hello? Miss Rolfstad, time for your annual maintenance." He stepped inside. Right there on the floor in front of him was Thursday's edition of the Bismarck Herald, laying exactly where Mandy had dropped it before fleeing in a panic. "Hello?" he called, a little louder this time. "Doug's plumbing, just here to check your furnace." He closed the door behind him. He stepped into the tiny living room and took a look. Everything appeared normal and untouched. Armchair, coffee table, and the couch. Moving a little quicker now, with his pistol ready, Doug methodically checked Mandy's small bedroom and the tiny bathroom, making sure to look in the shower stall, in the closets, and under her bed. It was just him and Cowboy the starving, whining cat, weaving around his legs again. All right, Doug muttered, returning the pistol to his pocket. In the kitchen, he grabbed 2 cans of cat food from the cupboard, pulled them open, then squatted down and set them on the floor. "There you go, buddy." Cowboy dug into the food. Doug stood up and wiped perspiration from his brow with his heavy sleeve. A glossy photograph on the refrigerator caught his eye. Mandy and Doreen, sun-soaked and grinning at some tropical beach somewhere, San Diego maybe, or was it Florida? Another vacation he'd opted out of because he thought he should work and keep paying the bills. And right next to the fridge, resting on the counter, was a pile of opened envelopes, Mandy's own growing pile of overdue bills. He glanced at a couple before inspecting the carton of lukewarm milk. He poured it down the sink. Then he moved back into the living room and stared at the couch. It was the moment of truth. Either the money is still here, or it isn't. He moved to the big window facing the street and peeked through the curtain. It had started snowing again, and the wind had picked up. Bracing himself, Doug crossed to the couch and pulled the coffee table out of the way. Then, dropping to his knees, he peered underneath. His pulse kicked. Carefully, he reached in and slid a bulky manila envelope out and let it rest on the carpet before him. He just stared at it. The flap was torn open. In the corner, Mandy's address was scrawled in black ink, half smudged. He stood up without touching it, backing away and looking at it as if it might detonate. He crossed to the window again, stealing another glance at the street. An elderly woman in a blue parka was walking past the house with a small dog on a leash. Fluffy snowflakes drifted almost horizontally and silently peppered the woman's coat. Doug watched her carefully as she tugged the dog along impatiently. She didn't look up at Mandy's house. She showed no interest in the little plumbing truck parked in the driveway. Doug wasn't even sure the woman noticed it at all. He waited patiently and watched as the dog sniffed and explored. Finally, they were gone. He returned to the envelope and picked it up. It felt heavier than he expected. He opened the flap and peeked inside. "Holy cow," he said. He withdrew one stack, flipping through the $100 bills with his thumb. They looked worn and wrinkled. So this whole thing wasn't some kind of dream or joke. Mandy wasn't delusional. The money was real. Suddenly, the distinct sound of a car engine idling just outside. His pulse launched like a rocket, and he froze in place, listening. He slowly stuffed the stack of bills back inside, then tossed the envelope on the couch. Quietly, yet quickly, he rushed to the window. Very carefully, he leaned in and parted the curtain slowly with one finger, just a half-inch. He peeked through. A car had stopped in front of the house and was idling in the middle of the street. Darkness was pending, but Doug could see it all very clearly. It was an older model dark Ford Taurus with rust creeping along its doors and wheel wells. The driver, a man in his mid-30s, wore a black hoodie with the sleeves cut off. His elbow was propped in the open window, cigarette pinched between two fingers, snow falling all over him. He looked Caucasian, wore a goatee. Doug could make out elaborate tattoos on his arm and silver and black rings on his fingers and thumb. And there was no mistake about it. He was staring straight at Mandy's house. Chapter 10. Doug's heart thundered as he inched away from the window, careful not to let the curtains jump. He pulled the gun from his pocket again. He held his breath and listened carefully. He could hear the rumble of the Taurus coughing and sputtering in the cold Dakota air. It idled poorly with its own distinctive cadence. Put, put, putty, put, 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 putty, put, 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 putty, put. The car didn't budge. It was just sitting there. He decided to take another look. The driver seemed to be studying Doug's plumber's truck now, his gaze jumping back and forth from the yard, the house, and the truck. Doug watched as the man took another drag, then flicked his cigarette into the street. He rolled up his window, and then finally, Doug thought, he began slowly moving his Taurus forward up the street. Doug inched away again, his heart pounding. He looked down while listening carefully. A bead of sweat dropped from the tip of his nose to the carpet. The popping and wheezing of the muffler gradually and steadily grew quieter in the distance. Put, put, putty, put, 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 putty, put, 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 putty, put. Finally, the sound dissipated altogether, and the house grew quieter, nothing but Cowboy scraping his tin can across the kitchen floor. Doug let out a shaky breath and wiped his brow with the back of his sleeve. Time to get the hell out of here. He grabbed the envelope, tucked it inside his overalls, and zipped up. In the kitchen, he patted Cowboy quickly. Sorry, buddy, you're staying put. He quickly filled the bowls with dry food and water, then cracked open 2 more cans. He opened the back door, peeked through, and listened. Nothing. He locked the door behind him, then resisted the urge to race quickly to his truck. The snow was turning angry now, puffy flakes replaced by dense pellets peppering Doug's face. He secured the truck's rear doors, climbed behind the wheel, and started the engine. He threw the thing into reverse, backed into the street, and a little too quickly for just any old random plumber, he sped away. He drove through the darkening city with the envelope safely pressed against his chest, the pistol cold in his pocket. He cruised south on 11th, picking up speed as he went, checking his mirrors constantly. At the corner of East Main, as he carefully rolled to a stop sign, a car appeared behind him. It seemed out of nowhere. It nearly rear-ended him while braking too late on the icy street. The glare of the headlights beamed at the Doug's side mirrors, and the swirling snow made it impossible to make out the car. He hung a right, stayed in the right lane, checking his mirrors. The car pulled out behind him and followed. He changed into the left lane, then pulled to a stop at 7th and waited for the left turn signal. The car was still behind him. When the light changed, Doug zipped away and drove in the right lane. As he slipped down under the railroad overpass, he scanned his side view frantically. The car was still following, now in the left lane and gaining on him quickly. Within seconds, it would pull up alongside him. Doug sped up while fishing the pistol from his pocket. As he passed the Bismarck Event Center on his right, the car approached, then blew past him in the left lane. It wasn't the rusty Ford he'd seen outside of Mandy's place. Doug exhaled with relief and set the gun on the passenger seat. At the junction with Bismarck Expressway, he hung a right and headed west. With his wipers flapping at the snow, he drove up and over the bridge across the Missouri River and into Mandan. Each time he passed a Ford Taurus, no matter what color it was, his pulse jumped a little. Suddenly those Tauruses were everywhere. Chapter 11. He cruised up the strip past Kroll's Diner and the Lonesome Dove, checking his mirrors for any sign of a tail. He took an abrupt left at McDonald's, crossing oncoming traffic, then circled behind the rodeo grounds and back to Midway Lane's bowling on the strip again. It was an idiotic route that nobody would take unless they were following, but nobody was. He felt his heart relaxing now as he drove downtown. When he spotted the old Mandan train depot, he pulled into the parking lot and rolled to a stop in front of the entrance. He studied the depot's elegant entrance as his windshield wipers rattled back and forth. He read the storefront sign, Jenny's Antiques. He liked the sound of Depot Dreams Floral much better. The sailing snow flickered in front of the windows, and Doug could almost see Mandy and Doreen on the other side of the glass, their hands moving gracefully as they greeted customers with warm smiles, wrapping colorful bouquets and offering friendly advice and suggestions. Doug sighed, then ran his fingers through his hair. He checked his mirrors again, then pulled away. He zipped up to I-94, where he took the eastbound on-ramp towards Bismarck, just 4 miles away. He settled into the slow lane and let out a long sigh of relief. Nobody was following him, that much he was sure of. He glanced down at the loaded pistol on the seat next to him. He patted the bulging envelope through his coveralls, safe and sound against his chest. So far, so good. Without warning, the little truck hit black ice and started fishtailing. The wheels slithered off course with a life of their own, and Doug suddenly had the sensation that he had absolutely no say at all about any of this. It came in a flash, and with it came a peculiar cocktail of emotions, sadness and regret, but also relief. Perhaps he had never had much control over his own fate. He hadn't been able to stop Doreen's cancer. She was gone. And now Mandy's life was likely in very real danger, and here he was about to screw up this most important mission, about to plow into the ditch or median or once again somehow fail to convert his love for his daughter into something good. Why is this so hard? He heard himself wonder as the truck headed for the ditch. Suddenly he knew instinctively what to do. It was ironic in a way because, as a father, he was always wondering what the right thing might be, and here he was now realizing that the best thing he could do in this moment was nothing. He let go of the steering wheel and released his foot from the gas. He'd learned about it in the Army while becoming a wheel vehicle mechanic. They called it the caster effect. Front wheels and suspension geometry, all designed in a way that when rolling forward, they naturally want to straighten out and point in the direction the vehicle is traveling. To panic and tug on the steering wheel now would be disastrous, sending him and the little truck, the money, and the gun into the ditch, maybe forever. And so he just let go and watched. The truck swerved left, then right, then again back and forth 3 more times, each slither a little tamer than the last, until finally he was pointed perfectly down the interstate towards Bismarck again, as if nothing had happened. Well, tonight Mr. Rolfstad discovered that sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is nothing at all. Just let go of the wheel and watch as some troubles work themselves out naturally. But will our newly minted gunslinger/plumber remember this hard-won lesson next week, or will he once again wrestle fate by the steering wheel? Tune in next time to find out. Friday Night Fiction is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. This story is created and owned by James Wolner 2025, all rights reserved. No part of this story may be reproduced, distributed, or adapted in any form without explicit written permission. Unauthorized use of this material is strictly prohibited and protected under applicable copyright laws. Check out more at dakotaspotlight.com.